I've done some really good mods to the Siren 883. I flipped the mirrors, I put new foot pegs on, LED headlight, LED signals, new handlebars, new grips. Now it's time to lift the tank, tuck the wires, relocate the coils and the ignition. Let's get started. Alright, today's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm gonna be doing the tank lift, wire tuck, and coil and ignition relocation. It's not necessary to take the tank off. You can do this entire process with leaving it on. Having done this before, I will say it does make it a lot easier. Yeah, it's not necessary to take this tank off, but it makes everything a hell of a lot easier. And you know what? It's not hard to take off. Removing the tank also allows you to clean the top of the frame and remove dead bees that were stuck underneath the tank. This video is going to predominantly be focused on the wire tuck and the coil and ignition relocation. There's an order of operations here that might be a little bit fluid. I'm going to start by taking all this plastic off that's surrounding the wires and then bounce between relocating the coil and the ignition. Probably stop the video along the way just to explain a few things that I'm doing in case they're not clear while I'm doing them. Let's get started taking this plastic off. Okay, I removed all the plastic wire covering, and now I'm going to start figuring out how I'm going to reroute the entire loom. There's two connections here that are pretty important where I need to figure out where they go, and that's this yellow one here and this purple one here. The yellow one is the ignition, the purple one is the coil. I'm relocating the coils in between the rocker covers here, so the purple one needs to be routed down in between there. I haven't decided where I'm going to relocate the ignition yet. It's one of two spots behind the rear cylinder here. either at the top here or at the bottom here above the transmission. I'm gonna play around with the wiring, see what fits best for the size of the ignition and for the routing of the wiring. Alright, I got the loom set up to start wrapping it. Before I do that, I want to make sure that I have everything in position. This is where the ignition coil is going to go, and down here is where the ignition itself is going to go. I'm going to set up the ignition coil and the ignition on the brackets first. I'm going to start wiring the ignition, then I'm going to go ahead and install them onto the bike. Just want to make sure that everything's in place before I start wrapping things. I don't want to have to undo it later. But it's actually still winter here in Wisconsin, and I want to stay a little bit warm while doing this, so I'm going to head into the house and start this. Alright, here's the ignition coil. I need to take the old bracket off and install the new bracket. The DK Customs kit comes with a bracket, this rubber mount here, and 2 bolts. Start by taking the old bracket off. It's a 3/16 hex. This is the backing plate that was on here. You're going to need to save that. Alright, this is a really simple process. We saved the backing plate from the original mount. It's going to go on the back of the new mount, just like this. The rubber seat is going to sit here in between the coils and the mount. We're just going to loosely install things right now. Once we get it on the bike, we'll set things up and we'll position it the way we want, and then torque things down. I never really liked the looks of this orange on the rubber seat here. I wish they would have made that black because it kind of stands out. Not a big fan of it. The torque setting on these bolts is 24 to 72 inch-pounds, so I may very well have it already torqued up, but we'll find out once we get it on the bike. Alright, let's move on to the ignition. Alright, there's a lot going on with the ignition here. I'm going to keep this as simple as possible. We'll set the ignition beside. In with the kit is the ignition mount, rubber seat, the push button LED ignition switch, which comes with some wiring, a CAN bus adapter, and some various connectors, and I'll explain these as we go along. Let's start with the ignition switch, and then we'll get to the DK Customs parts. First, we need to take it apart from the housing. We gotta take this cap off to be able to pull the ignition out of its housing. Usually this is pretty tight. What I did was I put it in the vise and I spun it. Right now, I just got it hand loose, so I'll go ahead and just undo it. All we need is the housing. We're done with the ignition. I need this switch to fit inside this housing here. As you can see, it's got a rounded thread area here. It's not going to fit into this shape here. So I'm going to need to file this down so I can fit this rounded shape in there. That was pretty easy. It's a little worn down from filing, but that's looking pretty good. Now I gotta take this ring and put it on the inside there. That's gonna be a little difficult. I'll start by using my fat fingers and get this on there, and then I'll use a needle nose plier to finish it off. Alright, I'm pretty pleased with that. Now we're gonna connect the wires. Just snaps right in, it's pretty easy. With these 2 holes here on the mount, it allows you to install the ignition in 2 ways. Set out or set in. I'll be installing it set in. So let's install the mount and then we'll go ahead and start doing the wiring. Alright, the coils are going to sit right here. That's going to look a lot better. This area here is looking pretty clean. I'm going to clean it up even more with some zip ties and wrap in the wires. The new push button ignition is going to sit right about here. There's a ground connection there that I'm going to bolt it onto. But the ignition is going to block this area here. This cover needs to go on there before the ignition does so I can actually install it. So what I'm gonna do is wire up the ignition first, just kind of leave it hang there, wrap all the wires, install the coils, get the tank on, and then bolt this all up. That's the plan anyway. We'll see how it goes. Let's get started. So this is how it's gonna be wired up. I'm gonna start by clipping off the original plug, then attaching the CAN bus adapter to the white and blue wire, and then the red wire to the black and green wire. And finally, to light up the LED, this live wire here, this black wire, it just needs to be connected to a 12-volt source. I don't want it to affect anything really important on the bike, like the signals or the headlight. So I'm gonna tap into the license plate light wire. I think that should work. We'll find out. All right, that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with it. Now to light up the LED when it's pushed, I need to attach this black wire to a fused 12-volt charge. This wire's not very long, so I got an extra length of wire here. And this red and yellow wire here is what connects all the accessories. Since this is an accessory, kind of, I'm gonna connect it to that. Haven't quite figured out how I'm gonna route this, but it shouldn't be too difficult. These posi tabs here, these make things really easy. Not sure how I want to route this wire here, if I want to come down to the right side of the bike or the left side of the bike. Thinking the left side of the bike, but I'll figure that out. Right now, pretty pleased I got this tapped, and it'll be ready to go once I install this. Nice. Whew, thought I was gonna have to take the sprocket cover off, and that would not have been an easy job. Well, it wouldn't have been hard, but definitely would not have been quick.